Hello everyone, my name is Rusty Sullivan. I'm the Executive Director of the Sports Museum. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our inaugural Curator's Corner vlog, a new feature that we're introducing this fall. And we're here within the Sports Museum, and I'm here with longtime Sports Museum Curator Dick Johnson, with whom this segment is named after you, so it's appropriate that you're here, Dick. So,
yes, it is.
We're going to talk about individual topics for each one of these episodes. The first one we're going to talk about, Dick, is Mount Rushmore for the Boston Red Sox.
Yes.
So if, forget about Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt, if we were to construct a Mount Rushmore for the Red Sox, who are the four ones that belong on the mountain? And let's start with the one that is absolutely automatic, and I can guess who.
Ted Williams.
Absolutely.
Number one. I mean, it was interesting. I remember years ago when someone complained about the fact they named a tunnel after him and said, well, what did he win? And then someone answered, well, 2 wars. Well, that sort of it talks about the 5.5 years he spent in the military, which may well have cost him a shot at surpassing Babe Ruth's statistics in terms of, being the greatest combination power and average hitter of all time.
Well, think about how much he was esteemed in his day, but it was a different era. Walks weren't really prized, right?
No.
Imagine in today's OPS era with all the advanced analytics, his numbers are absolutely off the charts when you by modern analytics. It's mind-numbing how great an offensive hitter he is.
Well, he's worshipped by current players like Joey Votto, who knows his stuff, to worship Ted. And, it's interesting. Here's a guy that never had 200 hits in a season, yet, didn't make a big deal about hitting 400 when he did at age, I believe, 23, because I'm sure he thought he was going to do it again,
Almost did at 388 and 57, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And, his career trajectory is interesting because the Sporting News named him Player of the Decade for the 50s, which is quite a decade to be named Player of. And this was a decade, of course, which started with his serving in the Korean War, serving in combat. And a fact that is not talked about as much as it should be is the fact that he achieved this great career, this great accomplishment as a batter, playing for mostly non-contending teams. I mean, certainly the teams he was on contended early in his career, tailed off by 1950. And here he was, day after day.
With no protection, and the line behind him, really.
No protection.
Yeah, sure.
He often had to create these little sort of what I would call cauldrons of controversy and competition to extract the best performances out of himself, because invariably after he would throw a bat or spit or, make some, ill-advised quote to the media, he'd go 12 for 20 or something. He'd go on a tear. So he had to create his own theater of drama to achieve this greatness.
My favorite stat about Ted Williams is that he won the Triple Crown twice, in 1942 and 1947. He didn't win the American League MVP in either year.
No.
That's incredible.
And George Kell prevented him from doing it 3 times by an absolute hair's breadth in terms of the batting championship. And, well, it's very interesting about the MVP award stuff.
Very political, right?
Very political. And my friend Glenn Stout, doing, a great research job, uncovered the fact that back in the day, the writers would bet on the results of awards like the MVP award.
Yeah.
And it was a New York writer that left Ted off the ballot. It wasn't a Boston writer. So, this whole idea of sort of Ted being pilloried by the Boston press just in a merciless way, yeah, kind of true, but not as absolute as he might have portrayed it. And, but the fact is that the media and Ted sort of used each other for their own purpose. And I think, again, during those years that the Sox were out of contention,
it made it entertaining.
It made it entertaining, and it also, he put pressure on himself to perform, and perform he did.
So number 9 is on Mount Rushmore, no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah.
Who's your second person?
Oh, David Ortiz.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because 3 championships, his clutch performances, I mean, the stuff I love the most, the sort of stuff that's just beyond pure statistical analysis. And his greatness was in his performance, yes, but just sort of his attitude and his swagger. Who other than David Ortiz could go out on the infield at Fenway Park in a pre-game ceremony, drop an F-bomb, and be lauded for it? Ted might have pulled that off, but I sort of doubt it.
Would have been off color or something.
Big Pappy did. And you know what? At the time, it was entirely appropriate and warranted, and it rallied a city behind him. And not many athletes can say they've rallied an entire community behind them. He did.
He already had a legacy at that point, but that cemented it for sure. I mean, my dad used to tell me that Yogi Berra was the greatest clutch player he had ever seen.
Yeah.
And I never saw Yogi Berra, but I believe my father in baseball.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that Ortiz wasn't better. I mean, he just came, he had a knack for coming up big every single time. And, you know, for 2004 alone, I mean, against the Yankees, unbelievable, but he did it throughout his entire career. He just had that knack.
Yeah, and unlike Berra, he was picked up off the scrap heap. I don't know, I'm not quite sure what the Minnesota Twins scouting department had against him, but the fact was also, you give a big assist to Pedro Martinez for having begged Theo Epstein, maybe not begged, told him, ordered him to sign his friend on a cell phone call during the off-season from the Dominican when he bumped into Ortiz at some charity event and asked if he'd signed with the team. He hadn't. And the call was made. In fact, I think Pedro dropped what he was doing and said, I have to make a call. Tracked down Theo. I think he had to make 3 or 4 calls to do so. And ensured, well, he basically ensured the championship future of the Red Sox. So
Does Pedro make Rushmore?
He's on my list. He's number 4. 3 is easy, I think. 3 is easy.
Well, let's go to Pedro, though.
Okay.
So Pedro's 4.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you and I have talked about this. He was truly the Sandy Koufax of our generation.
But unlike Koufax, he had to face chemical era players.
That's right.
And I think Koufax is probably a little taller, bigger guy. I'm pretty sure Koufax, because of course he was on a basketball scholarship to Cincinnati. I think Koufax is about 6'2", maybe.
Right.
Probably closer to 200 pounds. Pedro was all of 5'11", if even that. And 175 pounds soaking wet.
Right.
It is remarkable. His accomplishments, I think he's one of those players who, as you look back at his career, in hindsight, as years go by, you'll appreciate him more and more.
Well, particularly because, and you mentioned it was during the steroid era, and if you look at what, I mean, the best way to really judge a guy is how he did against his peers. His ERA was 1.5 runs better than everybody else in the league. It wasn't even close. He was so much better than the other pitchers in the American League in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's almost cartoonish how much better it is.
Well, and as a personality and a baseball citizen, I'll never forget being at the Baseball Writers Banquet in '97 when he's introduced to Boston. He's presented with a Cy Young Award that he'd won with the Expos.
Right.
He presents it to Juan Marichal, of course, who had had a brief stint with the Red Sox, his Dominican idol, who had never won a Cy Young Award in his career despite his greatness because of Koufax and because of being injured too. But anyway, so he gives that to Marichal and basically makes the statement, I expect to win more of these here. Wow. I mean, how do you not absolutely fall in love immediately?
So when we honored him at our 2012 traditional ceremony, we asked Pedro, who do you want to be the service presenter? And I suggested Marichal, Ortiz, there were a few others I threw out there. He selected Mayor Menino, the late Mayor Menino. Yeah. And he said, and I asked him why, he didn't really, or I asked, later on at the event, I was surprised by the choice. He said, well, I like Mayor Menino, and to me, Mayor Menino is Boston, and I love Boston. So he really had a sense of history and place and tradition, and candidly, he's stuck around this area, and I think that's great. But he was Picasso.
I can actually hear the chiseler starting to chisel him into the edifice now. I think we agree that he's on there. And 3, I think, is a little easier, and I'm sure you know who that will be.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, longest career here, I believe, if I'm not, again, I should have checked my stats first, but I believe the most games played in American League history for one team a remarkable accomplishment, and by all accounts, the toughest guy ever to play for the Red Sox. Not a particularly gifted or super talented player, but
worked his ass off.
He just absolutely is a workhorse. And for that season of 1967, I would argue the greatest single season a Boston athlete has had in any sport, because it meant everything to his team. They were a legitimate 100-to-1 underdog to win that pennant.
And once Canigliaro went down in August, no one gave him a chance.
No one gave him a chance.
And he just put him on the back and carried him. He and Lonzo guys. But Yaz was just outworldly that month of August, September, right?
Well, I remember him being quoted as saying that season, he'd go to bed at night dreaming of different ways to win games that he might not have used before. It's like, I mean, that's every fan's and coach's dream. You're dreaming of ways to win games that you might not have implemented before. And, you know, again, it was a season that statistically was outstanding. He was the last Triple Crown guy for many years. But what the intangibles, you know, just the work ethic was remarkable. And again, you know, he was a generational player that, you know, now you don't see players playing with one team that often. I mean, really, a Jeter is a rarity, you know, and Yaz was, that guy was here for 23 years. I mean,
so we have number 9, Ted Williams.
Yeah.
David Ortiz, Yaz, and Pedro. Who's the toughest submission? Who's the guy that would? I mean, and we're doing this all off the top of our head.
Yeah,
so
well,
it's unscripted. So I have no idea what you're going to say.
Well, I'm a sports historian, so again.
Tris Speaker.
Yeah, Tris Speaker. I mean, I think he may have been the most talented pure baseball player to ever play for the Red Sox. He was Willie Mays before Willie Mays. All-time leader, major league leader in doubles. Well, how many of those doubles would have been home runs?
Oh, tons. It was a dead ball hitter. Yeah.
And he was a center fielder who made unassisted double plays. Roll that around in your cranium for a bit. Can you imagine going to a game and seeing a center fielder playing so shallow, challenging hitters to hit over his head, where there were occasions he made unassisted double plays? I just love stuff like that. And certainly he was a great championship player. At one point, the highest paid player in the major leagues. And again, was just a discovery of the Red Sox off the scrap heap. He had tried out for teams like the Giants, who would, you know, basically ignored him, and ended up, you know, becoming really the biggest star in baseball, other than maybe Ty Cobb. I mean, there's really the trio in the dead ball era of the 19-teens of Ty Cobb, Speaker, and Joe Jackson were really the three. And Speaker was maybe a more complete player than the other two. The other two may have been better hitters, but he was the better complete player.
My toughest submission. I mean, there's been a lot of great guys in the last 50 years. I mean, Fisk and Rice, Boggs, even Dwight Evans. But it's hard leaving Roger Clemens off.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, you know, he's another guy. I mean, you could make a case. I mean, he was pretty special when he was here. Yeah. And 3 Cy Youngs, and you know, you could. It's too bad we couldn't have 6 or 7 people on the mound, but we can only have 4.
Well, maybe someday we'll create a mountain range, because there are there are players now who, knock on wood, they sign contracts and everything, but Mookie is, I mean, he's really special.
Yes, he is.
So I think we'll be, you know, certainly there'll be a lot to root for. Hopefully, some of those future stars will be in the bullpen, because we're sweating a little now. But the fact is that you could match the Red Sox for Rushmorean candidates against the similar for any team. You know?
Including the damn Yankees.
Well, because when you look at the Yankees, their pitching history isn't as strong as anything. It's really a collection of batters, whereas we have pitchers, you know. And again, so I think we've made a pretty good choice here.
I agree.
Yeah.
So that's our inaugural version of Curator's Corner. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.